Hello everyone, welcome to our fourth and final sailing refinement Q&A stream. This time we're going to be talking about lore and integration. We released our final refinement sailing blog just a few days ago. But if you're here for DT2, do not worry. Mod Ayiza is here to address some stuff on DT2. So we're lucky enough to be joined by him, and he'll be giving a quick update at the start of this stream. So first of all, let's welcome our guests. How is everyone doing today? We'll start with you, Elena. Sorry, I should probably point out.
I was like, who's gonna go first?
I'm too used to like the Discord calls without the delay. So yeah, how are you, Elena?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, thank you. As you can see, I'm in a different place today because there's some workers in my bathroom renovating the house, so I have fled the country essentially. Yeah,
nice
I'm
to
good.
see
It's
that
a drastic way to get out of dealing with
Not the
workers.
house, just the entire country.
Awesome. Yeah, don't dox which country you're in though, Elena, because you'll get people trying to find you. Husky, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm good. Had a great day in the office yesterday. I think with big releases, we all tend to get together and sort of celebrate how it's going, watch players interact with the content, speculate on how fast the quest's going to be done, how wrecked they're going to get by the bosses, or vice versa. So yeah, it was a great day yesterday. So still in a good mood with that today. Just kind of riding
the food
the
looks
hype.
So good. Awesome. And Kieren, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm buzzing as well. Desert Treasure 2's launch has been like absolutely amazing to sort of watch and be part of yesterday. All the streamers taking it on. Like, it's mad because it's always like 11 a.m. UK time, but you get everybody online. Doesn't matter where they're from, what time zone they're on, ready for the big quest. But it's always fun. It's like, this is why we do what we do, right? All these launch days, it's like, it really, all the stress, all the hard work when you do those sort of launches, that's like, hell yeah, this is what it's all about. But like, particularly my favorite part of yesterday is we had like a bunch of TV screens up near our desks. So we had like 4 streamers on each TV, and we were watching Wooks, who've got to Vod Orvis. I don't want to spoil anything beyond that, but we were watching the fight. Wooks died the first time, and all of us are like, we thought he was going to do it, and we were like, yes! It beat Wooks! And it was just hilarious. just entertaining. But yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. And Mod Ayiza, how are you doing today? Can you see the chat right now?
I can see the chat right now. They are making me sweat a little bit, but it's okay. I'm here to deliver. But yeah, doing pretty good, thank you. I'm honestly exhausted because I stayed up way too late watching people do Desert Treasure 2. And then I was like, all right, I'm just going to start the quest myself. I got halfway through. It was like nearly 1 a.m. I was like, probably should stop now and go to bed, and then ended up carrying on watching people on Twitch. So I've been thoroughly enjoying it and seeing all the feedback. And yes, chat, I'm well aware that you want to hear about the rings. Don't worry, I will go through it. In fact, shall I just do it now?
Yeah, just do it. I can see the chat
getting
increasingly.
Okay. So first of all, I will preface this with there is going to be a blog coming out shortly after this live stream. I'm going to be dipping in about literally once I finish going over this, we're going into a meeting to just talk about something else, which I'm not going to mention here, but you will see in the news post when it goes live. That's probably going to be around about 5 p.m., so an hour or so away from now. But I have a load of information that I can share with you from there. Before I do that, I just want to address one thing really quickly. This is obviously a sailing-focused live stream. We've been looking at sailing for a very long time. Yes, we've been looking at Desert Treasure 2 for a very long time as well. But given the fact that Desert Treasure 2 literally went out yesterday, and we stated that we weren't going to be making any significant changes, mechanically at least, to the bosses and the encounters themselves, that's why we're not doing a stream today on Desert Treasure 2. So it's focused on sailing, but obviously there are things that you want to hear about, rightly so. I'm going to explain to them, and all I ask really kindly is that once I've done this, wait for the news post and then let the rest of the stream focus entirely on sailing, because it is extremely important. And we will talk about Desert Treasure 2 in a live stream, maybe next week, maybe even as soon as Monday. So you can look forward to that. But that's the reason why. It's not like we're trying to hide away. It was just the fact that we didn't really feel like there would be a huge amount to have to go over. And we had the opportunity for someone like me to come in and talk about the things that really need to be mentioned. So I'm going to be doing that now. Excuse me if it looks like I'm reading off a script. It's not. I'm just looking over the news post to explain things. So first of all, let's talk about the Vestige drop mechanics. And if you don't know what those are basically the upgrades that you need to be able to get access to the higher powered rings that drop from each of the bosses. We put out some tweets yesterday to try and like quash the speculation that you had to put Nan in a cage or spin 3 times, kill the boss 7 times with a bronze dagger. None of that is true. All you simply have to do is kill the bosses. But we also understand that we were a little bit cryptic in explaining how exactly it works. So we're just going to tell you how it works, not the exact rates, but the underlying mechanical features of it. And then Mod Kieren can help address some of the decisions in terms of design and also what that actually means in terms of impact long term. So how does it work? We're going to use the Altar Ring here as an example, which comes from Vardorvis, just because it's a really popular boss, one of my favorites, if not my actual favorite so far. So essentially, Vardorvis has a 1 in X chance to roll onto his unique table. That unique table contains the Executioner's Axe Head, Virtus Pieces, the Chromium Ingots, and the Altar Vestige. Things like the Awakener's Orbs, the Blood Quartz, and the Pet sit on an entirely separate table from this one, so keep that in mind. So, the player has a chance to roll onto the Altar Vestige as part of that 1 in X chance to roll the unique table. Now what happens, and this is what's slightly different from other drop mechanics, is that after you've hit that roll 3 times, you will then receive the Altar Vestige drop. So if you were to hit that roll, if you're not due to receive a Vestige, you'll be given a drop that isn't on the unique table, which is outlined. And essentially you hit that multiple times until you get to a point where you'll just be given it. So in essence, it's very similar to the Venator shards obtained from the Phantom Muspa, which is where players hit the shard drop 5 times to assemble a Venator bow. Part of what the system achieves is it prevents players from going too dry, because nobody likes going excessively dry, and we're trying to be more mindful of those really long-term grinds. But what it also does mean, which is something that you've all been noticing as a result of that, is that it does also remove the chance to score the most sought-after drop in, say, for example, 1 kill count. So in a sense, the randomness for obtaining that Vestige is clamped, so that the extremely dry and extremely spooned players are much closer to the average expected drop rate. So while you're seeing a really high number of overall kills at each boss, a lot of that is because it's made up of players who have secured 1 kill for the quest itself, or from players who have then completed the quest and have been hopping around the different bosses to figure out which one is their favorite. Ultimately, what this drop system means is that the lowest theoretical kill count that you can attain the Altar Vestige or any of the ring pieces from the individual bosses is 3. Although it's quite improbable, like it's not very likely it would happen, but it is possible. And that is essentially how it works. You don't get notified that you'd have hit the ring drop rate, for example, 2 times beforehand. That's just part of the way that the drop rates work. And Kieren, I think you've got some extra information that will help explain what that actually means in terms of like length of time or how dry you might go.
So I've got some actual sort of hard numbers, I guess, if you want some stats on it. Obviously, we're not giving out the actual drop rate, but want to give some perspective, like on the odds of going dry. And this is what we're trying to really combat with this. And it's a bit of an experiment, really. We're open to trying new things. We'll see what works and learn from the feedback the players give us as well. One thing we've already learned is we probably need to be a bit more upfront when we're experimenting, obviously, because this has caused confusion. So, for example, on a normal drop system, the odds of going like 3 times the drop rate dry, about 1 in 20 people will get that experience. With this system, with a 3 shard system, however we want to call it, the odds of going 3 times the normal drop rate would be 1 in 162. And this gets it is crazy the difference this makes. So like if you even get rarer than that, like 5x the drop rate, it's about 1 in 150 people on the normal system, but only 1 in 26,000 people on this system. So it really does curtail the chances of getting like extremely unlucky. And that's meaningful for regular players, that's meaningful for Iron Men, because these are obviously a big part of the reward, right? Like whether you're a regular player just wanting the collection log, or you wanting to sell it on the GE, it's a big part of your profit. If you're an Iron Man, obviously the pain would be even more extreme. So obviously this is a bit different, it has the maybe somewhat of a downside that you obviously can't get extremely lucky. But to us as designers as well, we're also thinking, well, it actually kind of means you've earned it as well, right? Like there's an element of, you can still get, there's still a variance. You can still get lucky or unlucky, but it's less extreme. So we'll see how this goes. Obviously, we're literally, this is the day after launch. Let's assess where we're at in like maybe more like a couple of months and see what people are thinking. But to me, actually, I quite like variety, and I'm a big advocate of trying different things on different pieces of content. These bosses still drop Virtus. They have other loot that drops in a more conventional way. So felt like a good chance to try something new.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Thank you
Thank you
both
so much.
for explaining that.
Sorry,
Thank
sorry.
you,
Like, there's just one other thing that I'm going to mention in terms of other changes that you can see, and just as a reminder for everyone, there will be a news post, and it literally details all of that out for you. It doesn't have the same information Kieren just shared in terms of like what it means in terms of going dry or not going as dry, but we can look to get that added. So yeah, look forward to that in around about 50 minutes or so from now. I'm going to jump into a meeting, talk one last change, and then you'll see it. But I can share with you some other information in terms of what we're changing for Desert Treasure 2. Relatively minor, but it should be a massive quality of life improvement to everyone, especially those of you who are out there that are still trying to finish the actual quest, kill the bosses, might be struggling, and really do not like the long route back to some of them. So in particular, for the Stranglewood, for example, we want to add 2 alternate methods of getting to the rowboat at the south of the Kebus Lowlands, since if you don't have Xeric's Honor teleport, for example, on a Xeric's Talisman, it can be a pretty cumbersome return journey. So with tomorrow, we're going to be releasing a cold fix, which means the game will go down for a very short amount of time so we can update, and we're going to be doing the following. We'll be adding an extra transport option for the mountain guide, who you can find just outside of the Shazian encounter. He currently can take you between Mount Quidamortum and the western side of Shazian. We'll be giving him another option to transport you to the crossroads, which are due east of the rowboat, pretty much just west of the quest start location for Garden of Death. That should hopefully help for anyone who doesn't have access to the second means, which is we'll be also adding a fairy ring to the small clearing northwest of the quest start location for Garden of Death. They both basically take you to roughly the same place. The fairy ring is a little bit more like convenient, a bit closer, but obviously not everyone has access to fairy rings, and it, may not be the best method for you to get there. So there are a few other things that we need to look at, and it does mean that you still need to get through the Strangled on your way back, but it will hopefully help cut down that journey quite significantly. And then secondly, we're also going to be tweaking very slightly the Lasar Undercity, and that's just essentially 2 small terrain changes to cut down on some of the frustrations that players have expressed in regards to getting back to Camdozel. And that is that we'll be adding an agility handhold to the western side of Ice Mountain, which is pretty much just off it's like a few tiles away from the Lasar teleport. That will require 68 agility, and it will just essentially take you down the mountains that you don't have to scale all the way around. And then secondly, for those who might not have the agility level and want to use the Archaeus spellbook, for example, we'll be smoothing out the steep drop to the southeast of the Mind Altar, so that if you use the Mind Altar teleport, you can easily walk from there straight into Camdozel. So yeah, hopefully these few little tweaks will help getting around a little bit easier, a little bit more enjoyable, and allow you to focus on what's actually important, which is fighting the bosses as opposed to running around. There's a bunch of other little like small tweaks, hot fixes, changes that we're looking to make, and there may well be some really interesting and exciting news to share with you depending on how this next meeting goes. So look out for the news post. Tomorrow's going to be hopefully a really good day. Hopefully that helps clear everything up and we can stop spamming out rings, we can focus on sailing, and you can all carry on enjoying Desert Treasure 2. And that is it from me. So thank you everyone for allowing me to take the time to just go through that. I appreciate it, and I'll let you go back to sailing discussions.
Thank you so much. Let's wave goodbye to Mod Ayiza. Give some hearts in the chat, guys, for Mod Ayiza explaining that. We really, really appreciate that. And I believe that we will also be looking to welcome Mod Errol, but I'm not sure if that's going to be right now or just after the slideshow. Producer in my ear. Okay. Awesome. So we'll be welcoming Mod Errol, who is part of our editorial and narrative team. So we'll be welcoming her shortly. Before that, I will just quickly go through some announcements, and then we'll let Mod Husky take it away with the lore and integration presentation. So, !game update. Obviously, you guys know it. Desert Treasure 2: The Fallen Empire is finally here. It is our most ambitious quest to date, and a bunch of you have left such positive feedback on it. So make sure that you do that. Full details are in the link below. !blog will take you to the sailing refinement blog, which talks about lore, quests, existing systems, and more in terms of the way that sailing integrates with the wider game. Definitely recommend you give that a look. Video is basically a TLDR version of that blog, so Screep Munch has been doing amazing explainer videos that basically just make all the information super concise. And then survey, we sent out a survey basically asking you how you feel about the latest blog for sailing that we published, as well as like general refinement stuff for sailing. So if you haven't taken part in that, we would really appreciate your feedback, because now we're going to go away and look through all of the feedback, and then present our final sailing design to you. DT2 rings will hopefully take you to the clip of Mod Ayiza explaining. Whether that's set up yet, we'll see, but basically we'll send you the clip of the Mod Ayiza explainer that just happened on stream now for anyone that comes in late to the stream. All right, without further ado, we will welcome Mod Errol and then let Husky take it away with the presentation. Hi, Errol.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Right, yeah, so you've just joined the stream just before we're about to give the presentation that we lost it on the stages call. So yeah, just say hi to chat. They're hopefully a little bit more calm now that we explain the DT2 mechanics.
Hey everyone.
Hope you're doing well today, Errol.
Nice.
Awesome. We'll just let Husky take it away then with the presentation.
Cool. So, hi chat. Obviously, you can do the !DT2 rings as people are doing if you want to know. But let's talk about sailing. Let's talk about lore and integration. Let's kind of go over the recent blog a little bit. Maybe address some feedback. Maybe just provide a bit more information for people who maybe didn't engage with the blog, and we'll wrap it up with some sailing questions and answers. And I'll just mention Errol is here to help answer those particularly tricky lore questions if you got them, because I am definitely not a lore buff by her or Ed standards. But yeah, let's have a look at lore and integration. So if we move to the first slide. So obviously, like, this is the 4th stage in our refinement. We talked a lot about how navigation will work, how the actual sort of world might work. We talked a lot about core gameplay, and then we talked about the reward space of sailing. So now it's just kind of, we understand what the content is going to be and what it will look like with the skill proposal. Let's just kind of show how it integrates with the rest of Gielinor, how it integrates as a skill, and just sort of ensure that it feels like it could have been there from the beginning, right? So that's the goal of this stage of refinement, to just show how it connects to the existing skills and systems that you already know, and we're going to also introduce some new lore and tidbits. We thought it would just be fun to play around with ideas that could exist in sailing should we get there and launch. And I think that I just want to cap off before we get started on some of the actual specifics, that anything that is super specific and sort of like tied to lore or a specific, piece of content is still up for poll later on past lock-in, like if we get past lock-in, right? We definitely want to make sure that sailing is packed with content that players are going to want to engage with. This is just us saying, hey, what could it look like? And let's get that early feedback at this stage. So moving on. So we would like to start off your sailing venture with a sort of introduction quest. So your sailing journey will start off in Port Sarim, where you'll find Rob, Ned's son. He explains that as a kid, he sailed at sea numerous times with his father. But as Ned got older and retired from sailing, he stopped. As we all know, for those who've done Dragon Slayer, Ned doesn't sail anymore. But Rob thinks that he is now ready to venture out on the sea on his own, to keep up the dream that he had as a kid of becoming a captain like his father. Well, now Rob thinks he's ready, and he's got his eyes on a voyage that will make his father proud. Sailing near Tempros Cove, diving down and finding the legendary locket of Albazir. Now, Rob is looking for an adventurer brave enough to travel with him and to prove his worth as a captain. Accepting his offer will start the quest Maiden Voyage. You and Rob will find your way onto a ship that he's decided to borrow. He's very convincing, and he explains that the treasure that you'll find on this journey will be more than enough to pay for the ship when you get back. And so the two of you set sail, giving you the unique opportunity to learn how to sail for the first time, and Rob, even though he's an experienced sailor, gets the chance to be a captain for the very first time. On the ship, you'll get the chance to try out different facilities and familiarize yourself with some of the controls. However, as you can imagine, captaining a ship for the very first time and sailing straight into a storm may not be the best idea. We won't spoil any more of the quest, but safe to say that things don't go according to plan. At the end of this quest, you'll be presented with a ship of your own. It's not as big as the one you sailed with before, but it's a start. With your new ship, docked at Port Sarim, you're now free to roam the seas as you please. With this quest, we really want to capture that early game adventuring feeling, the idea of wealth existing somewhere out in the world and going to seek it. This isn't a grand adventure or an epic tale, it's simply taking a ship, literally, and setting off with a dream. And this is the same vibe that we want to instill in early and mid-game sailing content primarily. So yeah, idea for an introductory quest. I think we haven't really decided at this stage whether this is kind of hard locked behind it or if it's kind of more tutorially. I think there are a lot of things as designers that we think it would, help set up things with the skill, kind of give some direction that would help, and sort of make for a good experience that way. But we know that players just aren't generally a fan of saying like, oh, I can't do it without this. I think it's something that it'll kind of depend on the actual implementation when we get there. There's probably a lot we can talk about closer to the time. I think specifics like that just aren't really important at this stage in design. We just want to set the idea of like that sort of early game sailing setting, maybe explain how you get started, and that kind of thing. I also think that just generally, questing content can be accompanied with sailing quite well. The idea that you are going on a quest, taking a ship and setting off on that adventure. We already have a system to tell stories in that way. Obviously, leaning on that system to tell new stories could be quite cool and a good way to integrate the skill with the game world. Cool. Moving on to the Tortugan. So we've previously referenced these as the Turtle Tribe. I don't think we had a cool sort of race name for them, but this is what we settled on. We mentioned these in the rewards blog, and you guys seem to like them quite a lot. So we just thought we would explore some of the lore, maybe dig out a few of the details, and to give you an idea of who and what these people are, as an example of one of the many types of people you could find on your sailing adventure. So, the Tortugan are a relatively peaceful people living at sea. Most of them live on the Great Conch, an island found only by those who know where it is. The island itself is shaped like a conch, with spiky ridges sticking out here and there, and the island is subject to high temperature climate, and as a result, sometimes prone to devastating storms. They live in huts and caves on the island, and mainly live off of fish and other resources they harvest at sea. And having chosen to seclude themselves from the rest of the world for centuries, they have developed skilling techniques which you won't be familiar with. Everyone in the Tortugan society has a role, be it a fisher, a scout, warrior, gatherer, or healer, and it's custom to paint their shelves with symbols related to the role that they have. It's not seen as a caste system, but rather a way to show off your achievements within your role, as every role is recognized as important in their society. They're a civilized people who live structured lives and take great pride in their work. They look to their elders for wisdom and larger decisions, trusting the experience and knowledge they've accumulated over the years. Their go-to tool is the spear. It serves them through the many different aspects of life, be it for fighting, fishing, clearing a path through the brush, using the spear as a climbing hook, or simply as a walking stick for the elders. They are only allowed to make their own spears when they are big enough to fight, and making one isn't as easy as it sounds. The process forms a coming-of-age ritual for the species and has the young Tortugan go through a series of challenges. The spear isn't just part of reaching adolescence, but a part of their identity that they carry with them for the rest of their lives. It's common to attach little trinkets and trophies to the spears as an expression of identity. So yeah, just a little insight as to the kind of stories, again, that we would like to tell with sailing. Obviously, you guys like the proposal of introducing these people in the rewards, so just maybe a bit more information, sort of whet that appetite for those who were looking to for a bit more information. Moving on to the Griffins. So the Great Conch is quite big, and we've got the turtle people there. It makes sense that they could have threats to overcome themselves. Griffins are the natural enemy of the Tortugans. They live higher up on the island where they can spot potential prey from further away. And while they struggle to take on the Tortugans due to their thick, impenetrable shell, they are able to pick up the lighter ones and drop them from great heights to split the shell. This is why the Tortugans' idea of adolescence is based on their size and not just their maturity. Players being allowed access to the Great Conch will be able to fight Griffins, but will find that they are helpless against these powerful creatures unless they are heavy enough to not get picked up. This is a fun twist on the weight system in the game, as normally players want their weight to be lighter for the run energy benefits. Additionally, you will need to learn the best way to damage the Griffins from the Tortugans, as they have developed their weapons over centuries of fighting them. So yeah, I guess that's the second part of the Tortugans in sort of explaining the lore. I think that it's really important when you're introducing new areas of the game world to really just make it feel believable and lived in, to think, okay, here are the advantages that, of one sort of race, maybe how they're built, maybe like whether that's from like their physical stature or the way that they live. And then you can sort of extrapolate that into other problems and other cool stories associated with it. Moving away from them and over to the Barracudas. So we've talked a little about the Barracudas in the core gameplay blog. We established that they're a faction of thrill-seeking sailors who run the Barracuda trials. So let's take a deeper look and learn a little bit more about the faction themselves. The Barracudas aren't a formal group, but rather a mix of people from all over the world with a shared love of the sea and the sport of sailing fast in dangerous waters. These people love to challenge themselves and are constantly pushing to become the fastest sailors. This doesn't just include the best sailing techniques, but also the optimal ship builds and setups which result in the fastest ships. While the Barracudas have their dedicated headquarters, you will come across members of the Barracudas all over the sea. Out there, you'll have the opportunity to try their trials, which span a wide range of difficulty. After all, not every Barracuda member is the same and equally skilled, and the philosophy of the faction is to nurture talent and ambition regardless of how skilled an individual Barracuda is. But no matter their skill level, they are united behind sailing for the thrill of it, the sea breeze flowing through their hair as they rush through dangerous reefs, dodging monster attacks and outsailing volatile storms. While the sailors of Gielinor have always enjoyed the idea of going fast and racing against each other, the Barracudas didn't exist until their leader, Mako, stepped up to the task. Once from a small coastal village, he vowed to get out there and do something bigger and become the most skilled sailor in Gielinor. After proving his skill and making a name for himself, like-minded individuals naturally flocked to his side, trying to learn his techniques and resulting in his decision to unite them all under one banner. Now, he's seen as the father of the group, ensuring that the Barracudas, his family, stick together and foster the love that they all have for the sea. That said, don't mistake his kindness for weakness. Mako is certainly a force to be reckoned with and more than capable of protecting the Barracudas. This is just a surface level... Yeah?
Could I quickly ask about the guy in the bottom right and his backstory?
Chat have loved that. I've seen this a lot on Reddit. I think we just
Why are you losing it?
I think we just
Please
wanted
explain what is so funny.
Look, okay,
I'm
we wanted
sure.
different people. Yeah, you can
I'm
go.
pretty sure. I forget his mod name now. Our great concept artist who made this. I know his real name, but not his mod name, so I'm not going to dox him right now. But he obviously worked on this piece and wanted to get a mix of new and existing characters, and I'm pretty sure that that's meant to be Willow from Barrow, like one of Gertrude's kids.
It is, yeah.
Got it.
I mean, to be fair, if you look at the chat heads during the Gertrude's Cat quest, they are a little unique.
He
Static
looks
said it's
dead
Willow.
inside.
I'm like, yeah, that's Willow.
I'm really sorry,
What
please
has he got on his
continue.
head?
His hair?
The chat's just like, he forgot to bring sunscreen, and I'm just dying.
Gotta-
He's from Barrock. It's not very sunny, is it?
I think the real question is, where's the sun in Gillinor? It's just a black void, isn't it? How did he get burned?
Maybe he had a,
Don't say that,
maybe
although
he
I'll
had a
ask about
Dragon
Ren.
Slayer moment.
Now I need to know if that's hair or a hat. I can't tell.
He got burned because he had the RuneLite HD plugin activated from chat.
Oh, I'm really sorry, please continue. It's just too funny.
That's okay. I can't remember what I was, but this is just a surface level insight into this faction and what we kind of envision for their role to play at sea. I think notably there was a lot of talk during when we revealed this and talked about Barracuda Trials as a gameplay thing. There were, it's going to be like floor 5 of the Sepulchre from level 1 and danger, like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make sense to be that way, right? You've got trials that start off with basic like activities to do on your ship for low-level ships for low-level players, and they would scale naturally as they go up. And we thought that would make sense from like a game design perspective in terms of that content design. But if that is making sense from a gameplay perspective, it also makes sense for that to match the faction, and sort of we want to kind of explain through the faction why that would make sense for their faction to have easier trials. So just sort of fostering that like nurturing that like growth for like-minded sailors who are interested in becoming better at the sport, just kind of fit well with that narrative in the game. Well, that narrative fit well with the gameplay that we were trying to convey. Cool. Over to the merchants. So merchants are found at every port and make money from transporting goods and selling them. They are the best at sourcing exotic wares and finding someone to sell them for maximum profit. While the merchants compete with each other and have different ideologies, they are united by one common goal: to make as much money as possible and improve their standing amongst each other. The sea is a lucrative but also dangerous place, with threats such as pirates, which are a constant threat to their trade routes, and there is plenty of opportunity for money to be made by a skilled adventurer to offer their services as a mercenary. That said, they are also united under various merchant alliances, working together to protect each other's assets. You might already be familiar with Trader Stan's trading post and their charter ship service. That felt like a tongue twister. This is a prominent merchant group, but only one of many. While they are in an alliance, the merchants don't quite trust each other. It's a competitive business, and while it may look lawful from the outside, internally there may be some shady deals going on, such as paying pirates to target competitor ships, paying off the nobles who will give them the best trade deals in certain areas, and pushing out others in the business to elevate their own status in the hierarchy. We'd love to explore how the player could either try to make it in this business, or on the other hand, reveal some of these deals and figure out how deep the corruption runs. At a surface level, as a player, you will have various interactions with these groups. As a supplier, you may sell exotic items to them. They could be particularly interested in the new sailing resources. The rarer the item, the better the price. Or as a buyer, merchants may have unique items that you can't get elsewhere. Keep an eye on different traders at port to see what they have in stock. Or potentially as a worker. As mentioned in the core gameplay blog, you can take on tasks at port and offer your ship as a service to the merchants, earning gold as well as their trust as one of their own. Hilariously, by the way, there's a channel that's popping up in Slack and it moved over my text that I was reading, so I had to pause and move the window. Anyway, it's moved now. There's also the thought that we could delve even deeper, maybe tie it to a quest line or a specific activity like alongside sailing, that perhaps lets you try a hand at being a merchant yourself. We don't know how this could work. It's just a surface level idea, but we've obviously heard ideas of people saying, oh, what if there was like a merchantman mode or some way that I could, actually flex myself as a mercher in some way. I have no idea what type of gameplay this could be tied to, but if there is a design out there for that, this seems like a good place that we could tie it to. Yeah. Moving on to the shipwrights. So, we've seen players ask throughout refinement things like, what happens if my ship capsizes? Can my ship be damaged? If so, do I need to repair it? And if I teleport from my ship at sea, what happens to it? From a gameplay perspective, we've opted to simplify a lot of these gameplay outcomes. So we'll say that your ship does take damage, and if it takes too much damage, facilities break and will need repaired. The cost will be significantly less than what it costs to build it. If your ship capsizes, you will fall unconscious and find yourself back at the port you sailed from. Your ship will be recovered and not lost, as we don't want you to lose all the progress and time you've invested in your ship. If you teleport from your ship, it will be considered lost at sea, but speaking to someone at port will have them retrieve it for you. Again, we don't want you to lose your ship because you teleported off it, at sea. It just doesn't make sense. All of these make sense in theory, but we'd like to go one step further and explain how all this happens in the game world. I think quite often games just say it happens, and there is sort of no in-game explanation. It's just your ship is back where you left it, or I think one of the common tropes in MMOs is that your horse just appears and dismisses, like from out of thin air and things like that. So in order to explain it in the game world, our solution is that we provide this faction called the Shipwrecks. So they would provide their services at any major port found across Gielinor. They are a group of skilled workers providing a number of services to seafaring adventurers, and they're also out to make a profit from it. After all, helping adventurers is a very lucrative business opportunity. Gielinor is also a world full of those able to practice magic, and there are things which raw manpower alone would struggle to do. As a result, you can expect each group of shipwrights to have their own crafty and useful wizard to help with the more complex tasks, such as retrieving player-owned capsized ships and returning them to port to be repaired. All in all, the shipwrights offer a large number of key services, such as, but not limited to, port-to-port retrieval, sea-to-port retrieval, ship repairs, capsize recovery, facility construction, and schematic sales. We're excited about the possibilities here, and to explain a lot of the player convenience features through NPC factions and interactions. Our goal is to really make sailing fit into the game world, and to ask questions like, how does sailing work in an medieval low-fantasy MMO? And expanding that to include already established features of the game, provided through a variety of skills, including magic. Cool. On to something a bit more exciting, the Sea Legends. As I mentioned, we wanted to sort of tease a few ideas for lore that could exist at sailing and just sort of make it feel a bit more alive and real. So while we've established many of the factions at sea, including the Sailors, the Tortugans, one thing that strikes me, personally, is that one of the most terrifying parts of the sea is the horrors that lie deep within. That fear of the deep sea and being so far out at land that it's just you against nature and the threats that thrive and live within it. So we had some fun coming up with some cool sea legends, introducing the Sharhai, a legendary sea monster. The Sharhai is a massive underwater horror, feeding off anything it can eat, especially sailors that venture too far from land. Few sailors live to tell the tale of this beast, with many people believing it's simply a myth and told to scare people from going too far out at sea. No one really knows what it looks like. After all, those who have faced it are no longer around to tell us. That line sounds a bit stranger now we have concept art for it, but here we are. Rokar the Thunderbird. Legends speak of thunderstorms at sea being different from the ones on the mainland. With waves higher than the tallest masts, most sailors don't think to look up during a storm. The few who have report seeing a massive bird between the clouds, as if magnifying the power of the storm itself. And then finally, the Dark Dame. No concept art included, but this is a dreaded pirate ship with a feared captain and crew. Somehow, they always escape the authorities, and no one can figure out how the ship magically seems to appear and disappear out of nowhere. You'd think the Dark Dame would have fallen prey to Rokar or the Sharhai by now. What knowledge does this crew possess to survive so far out at sea for so long? Cool. So a bit of teasing of things that could exist out at sea. Let's step back a little bit, I guess, from cool lore ideas and talk about some of the things on a game world level. So we have this lovely asset, I think it was created, of the world map and sort of looking at it. I think one thing we talked a lot about during navigation is how very compact Gielinor is, and the goal of initial developers was just to cram as much content within a small space as possible, probably due to upload limits and trying to play on a browser. You don't want to have to download a massive map. A lot of the issues that players have pointed out with sailing are how little space there is around Brimhaven and Karamja. And our solution isn't to just make this bigger. I think we just really want to embrace this sort of quirky world that we have and not change it just for the convenience of a skill and like shift everything around to massive extents. So our result is to consider all of these sort of tight places around, say, Kandarin Bay and Sarin Bay as these shallow seas that are more fitting for small vessels, whereas large and colossal vessels would be more suited to the open and deep seas. To give you an idea of how we could split it up, you can kind of see this asset here with, the sort of colors and overlines. We've kind of given some names to the seas roundabout. Notably, as an interesting thought, the perspective seems to be from mainland of Gielinor. We've got the Western Sea, but Zaya might have their own name for it because it's not the Western Sea for them. Who knows? I think, where was I? After we did all this and sort of split it up into sections, there was one thing that stood out, and despite me saying we wouldn't want to move things overly and sort of remove change the playable area from what players are very familiar with, one thing that did stick out to us is how cramped Sarin Bay is, particularly because Tutorial Island is there. Its functionality doesn't need to exist to the game, in that place, and it's not a place where players return to. So we have had some sort of surface level thoughts about potentially moving it somewhere else because it wouldn't really change anything from how players are used to. I know that we also got some feedback that players might like to return to Tutorial Island with sailing. I think that if we did that, we would have to create a separate instance of Tutorial Island, not an instance like an instance like a off the game world. I mean, like a separate copy of Tutorial Island or somewhere where you can visit that isn't where new players go, because we kind of want to keep the tutorial as this safe place where people can learn without, people bombarding them in full, Torva and stuff. And just, you want to keep the tutorial a good learning place. If we did move Tutorial Island, it would also allow for Temperance Cove, as itself, to form this sort of isolation that sort of keeps lower level ships from just moving further south into open seas. You can imagine that perhaps if you have a large ship, you could sail directly south because your ship is now large enough to weather the storm created by Temperos, and then smaller ships would be sort of funneled more to the northwest towards Kandarin Bay. We also just wanted to note that we wouldn't particularly want to have the boundaries be this solid. It is the sea. We don't really want these lines of rocks sort of designating these areas. It wouldn't really fit too well. We'd probably want to blend the borders quite well and not necessarily stop people from getting there, but just have them encounter, if your ship isn't capable of handling the hazards at sea, you're probably going to be sort of soft pushed back. Otherwise, you risk the whole capsizing thing, right? And I think that couples well with what we're going for with sailing, in that it really just allows for that sort of natural exploration. It's just like if you walked into a dungeon with a demon. You could walk into Taverley Dungeon on an early game account, and suddenly you see blue dragons, and you might go, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be here. Or maybe that raises the challenge for those who are lower level to go, I'm a really skilled player. What tools do I have at my disposal to overcome them? And those are the kind of vibes that we want to create with the sea, as opposed to this just hard-locked, you need 80 sailing to get past this point, necessarily. Looking at some ports. So these are existing places around the game world. And these are going to be hubs for sailing content. We may introduce some new ports, but we do want to acknowledge that existing ports may need to change slightly, and that we'll be careful with how much they will change. These are specifics that I'm sure would come up later on in the design should we get past Lock-in Paul, and things that we would like to blog very specifically with players, get their thoughts on things like the aesthetics and the functions and uses. These are obviously very nostalgic places that, while they might need to change, we don't necessarily need to be destructive about it. Ports would serve a number of facilities for players. Notably, they'd be an access point to the sea. They'd be places you can obtain a ship. You would have to upgrade your ship at a port. You wouldn't be able to do it on the fly at sea. You'd also be able to customize your ship at port. We already mentioned trading with merchants. They would function as a community hub where you could meet other players who are interested in sailing content. They're a place where you can store your ship if you're done with sailing and want to go do something else. And they're also a place where, as we mentioned, you can sort of get port tasks and engage with that activity. And then the final thing is sort of the crew management side of things, where you decide who's going to be on your crew, what activities are they going to do, and that kind of thing. So yeah, ports have a number of functions. I'm trying to get through this quickly because I know it's been like 25 minutes, half an hour-ish, so I've only got a few more slides to go. Talking about familiar NPCs in the next slide, the long and short of it is that we would like you to have familiar NPCs sail with you. It's a thing that makes sailing feel very connected to the game world. And notably, it can also be very connected to your existing account progression. Players who have completed Song of the Elves know that Elena forms like a sort of bond with a player and interactions. When she's in Prif, maybe she gets bored. She's been bored there after doing the quest. You know, you're kind of like, oh, well, I've been living with the elves for a while, and I'm going to be looking for something else. Maybe you can convince her to come on your adventure, but that wouldn't make sense until you've done that quest. Or perhaps once you've completed like his quests, you can maybe convince Evil Dave to join the sea. You may need to also prove that you were suitably evil, because I don't think Dave would leave his basement for a goody two-shoes. And then obviously things like Vanaka, if your Slayer level is high enough, maybe past the point where he is a useful Slayer master for you, maybe he could join your ship and show you a thing about combat himself. After all, he was the one who showed you how it all started back in Chatura Island. There are questions about, do we find replacements or do we just have the NPCs in both places? I think all of that is manageable. There's obviously a lot of like nitpicky questions like clue steps involving NPCs. Like if we have Evil Dave as a clue step as an anagram, it wouldn't really make sense if we have like, you know, Evil Luke in the basement all of a sudden. That anagram breaks, right? That kind of thing. We wouldn't allow full freedom just on premise of like not breaking storylines in the game. Spoilers for Monkey Madness 2, sorry, but it's well known by the community that Neve unfortunately does die in that quest. And I'm not sure that allowing Neve to join your ship before the quest would necessarily save her from her fate. So we might want to look into other things. I know that players have been particularly creative and persistent about getting Neve on their ship. Maybe, I don't know, there's a sailing update in the future that allows players to have a ghost ship, and maybe Neve can be a ghost crewmate on their ship. I don't know. But yeah, we would have to be careful with which ones we do allow, so make sure to let us know what your favorites are. And again, these kind of decisions are just things that we want to say sort of up front that we would like to be part of sailing, but the specifics, I'm sure, could change post-lock-in. I'm sure chat is very upset with me. Mostly about spoiling the quest.
You just crushed them.
Okay.
They asked for Steve instead of Neve.
I literally have like 8 paragraphs on this slide, and I'm going to spare everyone and just say that there are a lot of existing quests that involve sailing, and we don't really want them to just exist and then sailing to just not make sense with them. We could change some existing quests slightly. I think notably, in Dragon Slayer it mentions Crandor. Nobody can find Crandor, but you can kind of see it off the coast of Rimington. It doesn't really make sense that locals don't know where Crandor is. It's literally 20 tiles away. Also, the terrifying attack from Elvarg, it was something that would probably be known, and people would just say, stay off the island, there's a dragon that lives there, and things like that. So what we would probably do is change the quest a little bit to the map not showing you the location of Crandor, but instead showing you the safe passage through the dangerous waters to Crandor. It accomplishes the same thing and just changes the narrative slightly, and those players who perhaps sail a bit too close to Crandor, you know, maybe they don't know the safe way through, they're kind of blocked by the terrain in a way, or maybe if they get even closer, like Elvar comes down and shoots a fireball and chases them off, right? Because they haven't slain the dragon yet.
Obviously, there's more detail on this as well in the design document, in the blog itself, so go check that one out if you're curious about like particular quests.
Absolutely. There are like 13 quests that involve sailing. Like, I think someone actually pointed out 2 I'd missed, so there's probably like 14 or 15. But essentially, the big thing is that they have a lot of islands that you can't have access to, and while we might have We might have to come up with some creative solutions to explain them in very RuneScapey ways, like Crandor. A lot of others could probably just be explained really easily. Like, one of the things we were talking about with sailing is that we don't just want you to necessarily have access to every port from the get-go as soon as you start sailing. One thing that could be part of your sailing adventure is unlocking access to ports by sort of gaining favor with the dockmasters. The dockmasters themselves won't let people dock at ports that they don't have access to or that they haven't gained access to. So simply having, you know, a dockmaster in Port Tiras who like doesn't trust you because you haven't accessed Taranwin just kind of solves that problem. I think we give examples in the blog about how, you know, Isle of Stone might not make sense because there's nobody on that island, so why we just plant a dockmaster there. Instead, we've opted for things like, what if you could attach like a sort of mirrored figurehead to fend off the basilisks, and that's what enables your ship to sail there. And that's like schematic would only be available after completing Fremennik Exiles and stuff. Also about XP and stuff, there are a bunch of quests that do directly involve sailing and have the player feel like they're sailing. I think Bone Voyage, Dragon Slayer, Cabin Fever, all of them. We would not like to lock them behind sailing. That doesn't make sense. But we would like to award some sailing XP for doing them. We would just make players who have already completed them gain a lamp by talking to these NPCs, should the skill launch. And we'd probably add a sensible level requirement to getting that XP. We wouldn't want a player jumping from 1 to 20 with a 2000 XP lamp, but if we locked it behind level 20, you're maybe getting a boost from, say, 20 to 22 or 23, or I can't remember the exact number. That feels more suitable as a reward for that. And we may also want to look at disabling other lamps just on the first couple of weeks, because the race to 99 is an important thing. I think we had a lot of players bring this up. Notably, like, while genie lamps are fine, like, it's probably not going to impact anything if a player has 20 genie lamps to inventory, it could be a notable advantage if someone else has, say, stockpiled elite achievement diary lamps. You know, getting this boost of, like, say, 300, 400k XP could change the competition. So it's just something where we would probably say, until someone's completed the race, you can't do it. But again, these are small details that we're open to discussing with the community long term. I think what we found a lot during this whole refinement process is the community want a lot of these answers up front because they're already thinking that far ahead. So we can't really ignore them, and we want to address them. But yeah. Finally, a talk on some existing systems. So there was a big talk with the blog about Iron players and sailing alone with friends. We've seen it come up a lot about whether the skill will behave differently for Iron players. Notably, like being able to boost an Iron player through a piece of content or train sailing for them and that kind of thing just feels like something we shouldn't allow. So we said that Iron players shouldn't. We basically gave a stance to the blog that said Iron players will have to sail alone. And while that's quite a safe take for us to make, I think there was a lot of players who were just a bit upset that they wouldn't be allowed to sail with their friends. We definitely see players agreeing with us that you shouldn't, Iron players should still not be able to circumvent content. They stand alone. So essentially, we've just agreed that there probably is a middle ground there. And until we have the specifics of gameplay mapped out in the entire vision of sailing, we won't exactly know what to restrict and what to enable. I know one of the popular requests players had was, hey, can I have other people join my ship? I'm the captain of it, so surely I can still go to where I've unlocked and take my friends with me, even if I couldn't go to theirs, similar to how play our own house. So that's something we could look into. It also raised a lot of questions about, well, if you're concerned about Iron players being boosted, what about mains being boosted? Because that's kind of not okay, right? All skills in our game tend to be very solo things, right? You can't really train someone else's woodcutting for them, for example. So I think that Slayer's the kind of weird exception with the sort of alt methods, but you're still the person doing the slaying and stuff. So I think it just highlighted that there are a lot of things that are tied to specific gameplay and how group ships work. Are you getting sailing XP even if it's not your ship, or how does that work? That I think we need answers to, and those are things that we'll look to answer further down the line in development should we get there. Onto Slayer. I think Slayer comes up a lot because people are just excited in general about the idea of the expansion side of sailing, all the new creatures they could get access to, and that kind of thing. But notably, we found that with Slayer, there is a block list problem where if we introduce a whole ton of new creatures and you don't want to feel forced to do them once you've unlocked them because your block slots don't last. So people often suggest that, okay, we'll just make it as an unlock on the Slayer shop, right? 100 points per new creature to add to the list. And the problem with that is that players might go into sailing, but yes, I've unlocked this new Slayer creature I want to fight. Oh, now I need to go and do like this arbitrary Slayer grind to unlock it, which feels really bad. So it kind of just comes down to, do we want, how many Slayer creatures are we going to introduce? If there's like 1 or maybe even 2, it's probably okay to go with a Slayer shop and just accept that. If it's a whole host of them, it's not really an elegant solution, and we probably need to look for something else. I know that Sea Slayer Master or Sailing Slayer Master has come up a ton, and that would probably be a very good example. I think that my personal take is that just bloating Duradel over time with a bunch of new tasks kind of, it kind of isn't really a sustainable solution, especially with how our block slots work. So maybe just generally adding more Slayer Masters over time for different types of creatures is just something that we should maybe be doing more often anyway. And then the final distinction is that Slayer at Sea is very different from the sea monster hunting that we spoke about in the core gameplay blog. One is an activity that involves Slayer-like tendencies, but is its own activity at sea. And the other one, Slayer at Sea, is just simply what you would expect. A Slayer sailing master, a slaying, can't speak. A Slayer sailing master. No, I still said it wrong. A sailing Slayer master. Can't speak, I'm so tired. Or having, existing creatures on the existing Slayer Masters. And then finally, talking about death, I already mentioned it earlier that capsizing versus dying are things we want to treat differently. If you die because a pirate boards your ship and stabs you, we definitely feel like that should feel like a traditional death. You literally died in what is considered traditional combat in the game. If your ship capsizes, we believe that you should be taken back to port, and it shouldn't be a dangerous death. But it does raise those questions like, well, it's not technically a dangerous death. Should it lose a hardcore Iron Man's life? Like, they still, like, did they fall unconscious at sea, or did they die? And then similarly, how should that affect hardcore group Iron players? Because even if we're lenient with hardcore, sometimes like there are places in the game that are more punishing to group hardcores. And the whole thing is just we're aware of these. I don't really have a solid answer. We'll probably go with what the community decide, what those people in those game modes maybe suggest or recommend. And I think that like even the player base are not going to have a good handle on how that feels until they're interacting with content, which is something that won't really become a thing until we're doing beta testing for this thing, which we definitely would like to do, like, should we get past lock-in. Have players feel how sailing is, have players like feel how sailing on like combat works, and then, tell us, okay, after trying it out, I believe that the stance should be this on hardcore accounts and death and that kind of thing. Final slide, and then I'll just shut up and let other people answer questions. But that's it. We're kind of done with sailing refinement. We've covered 4 sessions, and it's been an incredible, like, 3 months-ish since we, had the poll where you all decided, sailing was the one that came out on top. We obviously covered navigation, core gameplay, reward, space. We didn't actually cover the rewards. We talked about reward space, and the blog explains why that was the approach that we went with. And then finally, lore and integration, which you all, thankfully, thank everyone who's still here and sat through that 30-odd minutes of me talking. Next stage is the lock-in poll. We know when it is, but we haven't shared with you guys what it is. I'm afraid I'm not going to tell you that, but that is really when it is up to you guys to decide. We've done a lot of laying the groundwork of sailing, trying to answer big community questions, taking on a lot of community feedback, and really, hopefully, shaping a skill, like, for the community that was collaborated on with the community. We've had a lot of talented content creators help us with the infographics and videos and things. We've had the lovely Skill Discord, which has been a constant stream of feedback, really pushing us to, like, challenging, like, the things that we come up with and pushing ourselves to be better. But I think while refinement is finished, I really want to emphasize that sailing is not finished. Feedback is never too late. And our goal with this whole refinement process was to truly give the community a good idea of what we exactly are trying to propose for the first skill. We really want you to have that clear idea. And while this whole thing is a project of projects on, like, you could expect blogs upon blogs of potentially new, like, types of content that would be part of sailing in the future if it's past lock-in. We just want to stress that we will be looking for feedback throughout the entire process. We don't want to just go into a tunnel and disappear for a number of time and then come out with it finished. We want to still engage you guys every step of the way. So yeah, if you'd like sailing, if you'd like this journey to continue, this is an adventure to go on, let us know in the lock-in poll. And there's also a survey. I don't know if we've got the link. I can link it to someone in chat here. We can pick command. But there is a survey where you can give us some feedback on lore and integration. There's some questions about the process and stuff, and just to truly let us know what you think, because we do care. I know we don't get to answering every single person's question, but we do care what the community think. We truly do just want to make a skill that everyone thinks is going to be fun to do and to have a good time and to release good content. So yeah, that's it. I'm done. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Husky, for that. That was super professional and really explained a lot about integration and lore. I'm very conscious of time. Chat, could you give a massive clap for Husky? That was amazing, literally put together in his time between meetings. We really appreciate you, Husky. I'm going to go straight into the questions because we only have about 10 to 15-ish minutes if we're lucky. So I'd like to start... Okay, cool. Sorry to the guests. We meant to wrap up at 5. We'll go for a few minutes. So, number 10, do you think allowing some NPCs to be part of your ship's crew will affect likelihood of being included in future quests? I'd love to start with Mod Errol for this one. What do you think about this question, Errol?
Cool. So as we said in the blog, having NPCs in your crew is not going to save them from whatever grisly fates they might meet in their own storyline. But this is a really interesting question because we haven't actually considered the alternative. And it's something I think, like Mod Husky said, we're going to have to tackle on an individual basis. Much like we talk about the different islands, like that are quest locked as well. But I don't see why taking an NPC out to sea would totally rule out any further quests in their storyline. Yeah.
Awesome. Does anyone want to add anything to that? Are you happy with what we said?
I think it's spot on.
We don't want. It's just I think it's really valuable to be able to integrate sailing with a lot of the characters in the world that you've already met. You've already got to know. Some of them even already mentioned that they like sailing. Like, it'd be, I think, a missed opportunity to not involve them somehow. And I don't think that needs to come at the expense of future quests.
Awesome, fantastic. I'll move on to question 2 then. So, speaking about Maiden Voyage, the introductory quest, can you explain a bit more from a dev point of view why we kind of want to introduce sailing with a quest, and also afterwards maybe we can speak narratively, like how that fits into OSRS in general. So I'll start with the dev point of view. Elena, if you want to kick us off with that one. As a dev, like why is Maiden Voyage being introduced with sailing?
Sure, so I mean the gameplay and narrative kind of go hand in hand on this one. But I'm a strong believer in quests being a great way to just introduce new content. And I think that it's a unique opportunity to also teach the player about what they're going to do. So one example of a quest that already does this is Temple of the Eye, that teaches you how to play the Guardians of the Rift minigame. And then later, after the quest, you unlock the minigame and you can go do it, and you kind of have a rough idea, even if you spacebar through, like you have a rough idea what you're doing. And so that's kind of what we're aiming at. We don't want to just plop the player out at sea, like give you a boat and say, here you go, have fun. We want to give you a little bit of direction so that you're not totally lost.
I'd also like to add that, like, there are lots of cases in games where tutorials are done really badly, right? They make it very clear this is a tutorial. We're guiding you through step by step. It's not really like fun. It just kind of feels like it takes you out of the game. And I think that's why a lot of players don't like tutorials, because they're like, I just want to get into the game. And I think that I think that what we want to do with introductory quests is sort of like lead it in seamlessly, if that makes sense, to just, you feel like you're doing a quest, and at the end of the quest, you learned sailing, just like in passing. And I think that's how it can be done well. I also think that there are a lot of quests, like if you likened it to, say, Druidic Ritual, I don't think that Druidic Ritual is a very good herb lore introduction quest. It just go dip meat in a cauldron and then you can access the skill, and it's like, cool, what part of that involved a vial or water and a primary and a secondary ingredient, right?
Literally never use a cauldron ever again.
Awesome. And narratively, can we just ask, like, Errol, how does Maiden Voyage fit into the grander scheme of OSRS? I've seen a bit of talk on Reddit, basically, about some people thinking that it's going to be this big, sparkly, wow quest, whereas we've kind of pitched it more as like a humble beginnings type vibe. So what's your take
Yeah,
on
that's
that?
exactly it. So it's, like you say, humble beginnings. It's going to kind of fit seamlessly in with the other quests in that kind of starter zone, if you like, around Misthalin, and Falador and Fort Sarin. So it's going to be very chill. I've personally checked, and nobody involved is a Majorat, so it should be definitely more chill than I think people interpret it would be. It's going to be lighthearted and fun.
Awesome. I think that
I
some
would say
players
as
saw the
well.
legendary artifact stuff and they got it. They thought that it was going to be a much more grander quest than it was. Sorry,
Well,
Elena, please.
I don't.
No,
Please go
I'll
ahead.
let Errol respond to that first.
I was gonna say I don't want to spoil anything, but like any good old school quest, there's a twist in the tale. This legendary artifact
Well
may not
said.
be what it seems.
That would be very RuneScapey. I just wanted to say that we know that people are obviously going to want to get into sailing as fast as possible, so that we wouldn't look to make this like a really long and windy quest, right? Like quick, learn the basics and then off you go.
Awesome. All right, I'll speed on to the next question. It's question 11. Will players be able to rescue crew members who are lost at sea from perhaps a shipwreck, or will there be a loyalty system for the crew, i.e. more adventures they go on, the less likely your crew is to quit or flee from danger? I know that we haven't really fleshed out the crew system yet, but what are your thoughts on that?
So we talked a bit about that in the previous blog, I believe, actually, where we said that, there's infinite depth that we could attach to the crew system, and we're not really sure what we want to do with it, and kind of we want your feedback, essentially, like how in-depth should the crew system really be. One thing we proposed there was to have like a level up system so that some crewmates, I suppose those are two different things. Like you could go the way of some crewmates being really good at certain tasks and others not being that good at it. Like one person might be good at the cannons, another one might be good with the sails. So you want the best person for the task. Another way to go about it is to say that the more your crewmate is setting the sails, the better at it they get. And so they might do it sooner, or they might do it more often, potentially. If they're on cannons, maybe they're more accurate as they level up. Or similar to this question where they ask, could we have a loyalty system? Absolutely, we could, but I think there's also beauty in simplicity, and we don't have to make it really complex. If their purpose is just to automate stuff for you so that you can do the fun bits, then why would you want an NPC to do that?
Awesome, great answer. I'll speed into the next question. So this is about Tutorial Island, and a suggestion that's come up time and time again. By the way, this is question 6. A suggestion coming up time and time again is to allow players to revisit Tutorial Island. So from a dev perspective, can you explain your thoughts on that? And also, if this was a thing, I'd love to hear from Errol about what kind of quest line you could imagine this to take. Just for fun. So we'll start with you, Husky. What are your thoughts about allowing people back to Tutorial Island? And then we'll go to Errol.
So I think that Tutorial Island, as a designer, obviously serves a lot of purpose for actually teaching players the game, right? Like, so a lot of the basic examples, teach them about the skills. And as I kind of mentioned in the presentation, it's not something we want other players to interfere with. There's also, like, just funnily enough, there's a bit of code under the hood that says if a player leaves Tutorial Island, wipe their bank. From anything they have. So if we did allow a regular player to get to our island, we probably don't want that code to run. It would be like all these weird exceptions and stuff, and would just make it messy. So I feel like if we did allow players to get back to that land space, we would say, let's just leave this where it is and make another copy of Tutorial Island that isn't the tutorial that players can get to if they want to engage in that content. I don't know what kind of quest that is. I don't know if Errol's had any ideas.
Yeah, I think it would be really cute to go back and kind of revisit all these nostalgic NPCs who taught you how to play the game all those years ago, and maybe help them out with something as well. I can imagine it being very cute. I don't think we'll murder anyone. Probably.
Awesome.
And this is where
I guess
you find that the first guide that you talk to is a Marjarat or something like that
Yeah.
on the island.
The entirety of Tutorial Island is made of Marjarat.
Sliske is actually every single mentor, and he was guiding and setting you up for every action you've ever taken in game to manipulate it to his plan, right?
It was actually key to his plan that you fished and cooked those shrimps very early on.
Yeah,
He's actually the CEO of Jagex. Like, he just runs the whole game.
Actually, all of us.
Yeah.
I think we've just
I'm
spoiled the
Sliske.
plot of that. All right, I'll head into question 12 now because we're short for time. So this one's a bit of a vague one, and I would urge everyone to approach it with caution, basically. But we did address it on our stages talk, so much of this is like we have addressed it before. But for the Twitch audience who's just tuning in, OSRS has many mysterious lands that have not been added yet to the game. They're mentioned, though, in books or NPCs across the world. But if sailing actually passes and goes into the game, can we use sailing to eventually get players access to those areas? Or does it interfere with the game's timeline and with the game's narrative? So, Kieren, I'd love to ask your thoughts on that, and then we'll go to Errol about the narrative side of things.
I mean, it's all good potential source material to generate ideas of potential locations. That said, it doesn't necessarily mean like something like the Eastern Lands is mentioned in game. That might not be something we want to explore right now. I believe most of the intention is to stay closer to the landmass we currently have, as that sea and ocean's got plenty of potential to be populated and so on first. Obviously, nothing is entirely locked down yet in terms of what every single point of interest at sea might be, and where there's inspiration to be drawn. Hell yeah, we're going to use it. The more entwined with the game, the existing narrative, existing lore that's there, the better, in my opinion.
Cool. Thank you for that answer, Kieren. Errol, does that interfere with the timeline of the game, or can we kind of get past that?
I don't think it would, in the sense that, like, you know, we've got a plan for these places. Some of them are very plot heavy already. And sailing being introduced isn't going to make them come into the game faster, but it's also not going to make them come into the game any slower, I don't think.
Awesome. Great answer. Cool. And then we'll finish off with this question. So Legends at Sea, this got a lot of hype in the chat. We talked about it in the sailing blog. But can players expect to see more gods, goddesses, or deities perhaps being added to the game that might have a relationship to the sea and sailing? What are your thoughts on that? I'd love to just ask everyone here. So Elena, Husky, Kieren, Errol, what are your thoughts?
Elena first.
Do you want us to answer in that order?
Yeah, sure.
It's always so difficult with the lag, right? Currently, like, no plans, but it could happen, right? I think it makes sense when you introduce sort of new societies, like the turtle people, who have been secluded for a long time. Like, do they believe in a deity? Do they have a god? Is that god actually, like, physically there? Do they have a different interpretation of gods than the rest of the game do? Like, the rest of the people in the game do? All of those are super interesting questions, and that's kind of like one of the bits that I'm really looking forward to if sailing passes, to get to go explore those. So, short answer, we don't know yet, but I'd love to go explore it.
So,
I definitely think there's a difference, as you mentioned, between an interpretation of a god and what is an actual god as well. In Gielinor, like I think like the game itself is used to we know that Guthix is an entity that exists, and like Saradomin and Zamorak, like that seems to be like accepted by the community as far as the game lore and stuff. And I don't think any sort of sailing would look to circumvent now the gods are in Gielinor, but it's the sailing gods. Like, that's not something we would want to do. I think like interpretation of god is interesting, like how I'd probably lean into it. When I first did the Forthos dungeon, I looked a lot like Ranos and Ranul, where it was like the worship of the sun and the moon. And when you think about like people and societies or cults and this kind of thing, they tend to worship things more powerful than them that they might not understand, like in some contexts, right? So it's like worshipping the sun as this magnificent being that gives me light doesn't mean that that is now a sun god and an entity that walks around with the power of the sun, right? That just means that these people have formed a religion sort of worshipping the sun. So similarly, you could imagine something similar with the sea. Maybe there's a bunch of folk tales and myths and legends of, you know, the sea. Maybe some of these, like we mentioned the sea legends before, maybe some people see the Sharhai as a god. Who knows if it is? Is it a really big, weird, twisted, shark-ish like looking thing that lives underwater? Or is it actually some sort of being with creatures, being with powers, or creature with powers or something? Who knows? I think all of these are just cool ideas and story that we could look to explore for sure. And I think it's hard to say definitively yes or no to anything at this point.
Oh, is it my turn?
Errol or Kieren, whichever. I think we've covered it, but I'd love to hear Errol narratively, like what are your thoughts on it?
Well, one of our big narrative pillars is that the gods are quite hands-off. You know, they're never going to show up and give you a quest in person. And with that in mind, I kind of feel like it would be a bit weird to create even more gods that players aren't going to meet. I think I'd rather expand on the lore we already have. Like when we were doing Tombs of a Mascot, one of the big behind-the-scenes questions me and Ed had were like, you know, what have all these avatars of Timokan been up to for like 6,000 years? What was Elena doing during the whole of the God Wars? And I think maybe these are questions we could answer. I'd definitely like to answer them.
Awesome, thank you so much. Right, well, I think we've about covered it and we're at time, guys. So I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone on this stream. I'm really sorry that the last bit of it was a little bit rushed, but thank you so much to Mod Elena, Mod Husky, Mod Kieren, and Mod Errol for joining us on today's Q&A. Just a quick recap of the announcements. !game update will take you to the latest game update, Desert Treasure 2. If you haven't played the quest, what are you doing? Get online, stop playing. And then for our sailing blogs, !blog, !video will give you all the information that you need to know. However, I think Mod Husky covered a lot of it in today's stream. If you would like and you have time, please take part in the sailing survey. It's highly important. It's probably the most important survey now during refinement. So please take part. That's !survey. And then if you missed Mod Ayiza's explainer on the drop mechanics for the DT2 rings, !rings. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, chat, for being wonderful after Mod Ayiza's explanation. And we will see you next week for a DT2 stream. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.